All right, day after the big disaster, I'm gonna dial in on some good stuff that I found on my own and some other stuff someone presented to me. And it's Gridiron Doctor. And I think it's gonna really crystallize everything I've been saying, and it's gonna leave very few people able to say, you know what, Greer's done a good job. Obviously, McDaniel has his issue, and I'm going to cover that too. I got a funny little video from, if you're an old guy like me, I Love Lucy, but it's going to set understanding of a lot of things I've been talking about, a lot of the principles, and how it applies to McDaniel. It doesn't alleviate his responsibility, but when you're judging somebody, when you're evaluating, it's always got to be in context. I've said that about Tua. I said that about Flores. I've said about Grier, everybody, even me. Context is king. And so I got a lot of good stuff for you. I want to look at this little Hemingway quote. It's a great quote. I love Hemingway. I mean, who doesn't? How did we go bankrupt? Two ways, slowly, then all at once. And this is a key understanding to know that the Dolphins, for some, looked like they were building in the right path. I happen to, since 2021, say I don't see it that way. But there were times along the way that I was like questioning myself. But there's a lot of reasons why I put my foot in the ground. No need to get into all that right now. But it was very clear to me. And so I knew that at a certain point, this thing was going to break. And now we're at that point where it's all at once. It was a slow drips and drabs, but I want to show you this image that's going to show you clearly how it was slowly and now why it's all at once. Okay. Very good, very crystalline image. Okay. So this is from Dr. Gridiron, and he did a fantabulous, amazing job and was able to keep me from having to do all this work. The images here I'll get into, but I want to start off with his opening quote. The Miami Dolphins rebuild, led by Chris Grier since 2020, paints a troubling picture. Out of 33 draft picks, it's a lot of them, 45% are no longer on a team, 36 have been relegated to backup roles, only 18% became starters, and a mere 3% reached Pro Bowls. One. Okay. And, there's certain guys that you want, I would say, Phillips reached the Pro Bowl level. I would say, Tua got it. Some people say he wouldn't deserve it. I think it's a little bit more than that, but it's still a low level. You could say Hunt or Wilkins. These are good players, and they were near the Pro Bowl level. Okay. But when you go and you look, you can see the image here. You see 2020 draft, only Tua and Jackson remain. Everyone else is gone. And you can say, well, yeah, I didn't have to pay Hunt. He was too much money. Well, I think some people are changing that now, but these guys are like pretty much out of the league, most of these people. Hunter Long, Larnell Coleman, you can see that. And then, you got Liam Eichenberg. He's starting, but is he a starter? Holland, good player. Phillips, good player. Waddle, you spent 2 firsts. Skyler, people aren't so hot on him now. Easy, he's on the team, but he's not a player. He hasn't done anything for the squad, and he's been here since 22. Channing Tindall, another guy. Achane, you got to like Achane. I think this guy could do a lot more stuff if he had a better framework. Cam Smith hasn't done anything. And then we got 24, Jalen Wright, I like what I'm seeing. Chop Robinson, I like what I'm seeing. And Patrick Paul, there's some flaws, but I like the projection. So there's a possibility of this 24 draft, and then Achane from the 23, and like maybe Cam Smith, but it's starting to get a long shot. But you could see how he has subsisted on free agents, Hill, Tehran, Ramsey, Chubb, and those are a vast amount of picks tied to that. And so you're not even seeing those picks because to me, Chubb is a waste. It was a waste of a draft. You could have had Van Ginkel, who would have been as good or close to as good. Obviously not as talented. Ramsey, you like Ramsey, but, maybe you could have found somebody, cheaper and in the draft. And I like that move, although I'm worried about his age. Hill, you got to like Hill, but now you're seeing Hill start to melt down. You see he's not clutch. He did a lot of stuff to uplift this ugly crack quarter we got and put a lot of face makeup on it. But really, where is he taking us? Very talented player. But KC's won 2 Super Bowls since he's gone. Tehran, I love Tehran, but he's been broken down a ton. And I think now he's pretty much, his body's given up. So if you add those draft picks in and the context behind that, those players, you could see that why this team is struggling. And this is not a norm. And this was with pretty much unprecedented or near unprecedented amount of draft capital. We lost 2 picks, the first and third, so you got to add that in there. But this is not a top level GM. And you could see basically the underpinning of this failed design is why you take Tua out and the whole thing crumbles. This is not a team that is built with a good foundation. It's flim-flam, throwing stuff against the wall, smoke and mirrors. And when it all comes down to it and you get put in the phone booth, this team, or when things aren't perfect, whether it's bad weather on the road or against a little bit better of a team, where there's some injuries or lack of discipline really can swing things too for us, you can see why this team struggles. So I want to move on to McDaniel. Clearly, Grier is not good enough. I think he understood he wasn't doing good enough in the draft, and he grabbed high-end talent with these free agents for a quick splash, so people say he did a good job, and he used a lot of assets. And, Hill and Ramsey, you would say, okay, maybe, those were good assets, but then 50% with Chubb and Tehran. Sadly, my man Tehran's great, but the injuries, those are misses. So there's a lot of picks. So I think that, it's pretty clear he hasn't done a good job. Because if he did, we would be able to put a backup quarterback in it. He'd have had the right backup quarterback. Green Bay went and got Willis, and they did well. You could see Darnold over in Minnesota, and they are doing well. There's reasons for that. I'm not going to dig into that, but clearly Chris Grier. Now, with McDaniel, people misunderstand me. And I think for many years, they've misunderstood why I fixated on the offensive line. I want you to think of the offensive line. And this skit is going to be I Love Lucy skit. My wife, she loves Lucy. When I first married her, she would be like vacuuming or something and just stop when Lucy would come on, sit down and just watch it in trance and look at me. Michael, I love Lucy. I Love Lucy, watched as a kid. I think it's a great skit. But Lucy's going to be working on a conveyor belt. And it's going to start at one speed and it's going to pick up speed as she takes the candies off and wraps them. She's like, oh, this is pretty easy. And then as it gets faster and faster and faster, she starts struggling. And eventually she's like, you'll see. And so the offensive line is the conveyor belt. It sets the difficulty for every job the skills have to deal with. And then it also sets the conveyor belt for the defense, because if they're on the field all day, a conveyor belt speeds up. It also sets the conveyor belt for the OC, because the OC, no matter what many of you might be saying, skills are more important. We don't need the offensive line, and whatever you're hearing from certain media types, every offensive coordinator, quarterback, running back, and even Hill had said it with Tehran, and he makes everything go. They know that the offensive line sets the table, and they base everything off their offensive line, and then weekly in their matchup with the defensive front. This is not like Curtis's little thing. This is like foundational football. And because it's so foundational football, that's why I've been so accurate. This is why I said in 2021 that we would struggle, and this is going to be what's going to happen. And my accuracy has been that way because the offensive line has been so poor, and it's a tried and true principle. So I want you to watch this funny little skit. And think of McDaniel, think of Tua, think of Snoop, think of Skylar, think of the running backs, whatever you want. The offensive line, isn't relying on anyone, according to Jim Harbaugh, but it sets the table for everyone. And the faster it goes, the more acumen and skill and ability you need to navigate that speed. And if you add in the cold weather and all these other factors, sometimes it gets too much. Quite often, when it's as bad as we've got as in the offensive line, it gets too much. So here's the video. I love this. It was great. Check that out. So this is your offensive line. Things are going good. Blocking for you holes. Decent level of protection. Uh-oh. You're not blocking so much. The blitz is coming. You see, now the job starts getting unbearable.
Listen, I think we're fighting a losing game.
And so, just like Lucy, she's like, this job's too much. I can't handle it. Mike McDaniel has a lot of flaws. He was a green head coach he was the bottom of the barrel that we went to take. He was a guy who was in the booth and a run game coordinator. You brought him in and said, hey, we want you to be the HC and OC. We're trading for Hill now, and we got to win right now. We're going to raise the ticket prices 30% next year. We got to win right now and look real good. Let's go. We got Flores thing. We got to put a distance between us and Flores. Week one, the conveyor belt started picking up. And teams immediately saw his scheme and all the smoke and mirrors and how he was hiding the deficiencies. And they started taking away week by week. And then the conveyor belt picked up. And we went from 2-3-5, clean time to throw in 2022, down to 2-1-3. 2-0-9 in 2023. This year, we're down to 2-0-1. And you don't want to have to throw that fast. If you need to beat the blitz and to take advantage of certain things, that's fine. But this conveyor belt is smoking. The quarterbacks can't handle it. Defenses know what you're doing. And McDaniel is he's way over his head. He should have used Snoop to move. We all know that, to do boots and rollouts and move the platform and cold runs. We all know that. And I'm not taking that away. I'm not taking away the lack of discipline, but the quicker that conveyor belt goes, the more motions you need and the more smoke and mirrors, the harder it is to maintain discipline. And when you're not a Hall of Fame coach with a lot of experience, the job is untenable. He is over his head. He might have been over his head with a good offensive line, but certainly with this offensive line, he's way over his head. Whether it's game planning, whether it's calls, whether it's adapting, there's only so many things you can do. And so if you look at the run protection grades, I'm going to get out the film tomorrow, but here's a symbol of what we got here. Look at this. Two guys, Jackson misses his target, and now look at them. They got him handcuffed. And you got misses by Brewer. You got misses by the tight end. These are untenable positions, and this is not an outlier. This is commonplace. Eichenberg is in his, third or fourth season? I don't know anymore. Whatever. He's been here a long time. So is Jackson. And these guys are still missing targets. When you go to block somebody, you're targeting either shoulder or the center. These guys consistently. Now, Jackson on this play, he's going against a 350-pound guy who's not noted for mobility. He's supposed to be a mobile guy, and he still can't hit the target. He hits the outside shoulder. Eichenberg passed by and realized, there's a screw up. And so what do? They handcuff the guy. And Eichenberg consistently misses his target. Jackson consistently misses his target. We've stuck with Eichenberg over and over. Do you think McDaniel's saying that's what I want? If it is, then he's totally incompetent, insane. But we were forced with them even with Flores. And Jackson, you can pay him $12 million a year. He just has to get flush on that guy, open up the two-hole. Even if Hill's coming down the line cutting his guy, he just cuts straight up and he picks up 3 or 4 yards. And the linebacker, Mr. Red Shoes, as Eric Smith calls him, on the right side, he's out of the play. But because that play is blown up, and Jackson's not going to handle that guy. Jackson's guy has no power. And so when you look at our draft status, what we've done with it, wasted tons of picks, vested in free agents, let our good gut players go, you can see how the conveyor belt is so fast for McDaniel. And again, I don't know if everything was conducive that he would be a success. But I know that this is way too difficult for any guy who's a green head coach coming from the booth, run game coordinator. So last little bit, passing pressure and passing concept. We threw 28 passes, 19 of them were clean, but they were thrown at 1.91 time to throw, the yards per attempt at 5.7. As I talked about with the leverage, they rush for, you can see when blitzed, only 4 times out of 28 times. And then they play high leverage in the box. They have angles to the edge in the run game and the screen game. And then they play over coverage with usually 7 guys against 3 of ours. Okay, we ran play action and screens 53.5%, which is extraordinarily high to mitigate the pass rush, and still under pressure 32.1% of the time. Again, does this say that Snoop didn't miss those deep plays? Yeah, but is he a deep arm thrower? No, he's a mobile quarterback who should have been put on the move, given shorter throws. I mean, that's what people don't realize. 2 hits those quite often. Those aren't easy, especially for a mid-tier quarterback with not a big arm. Snoop's skill set isn't the deep throw. It's to be mobile. And if you watch Green Bay with Willis go against Tennessee with Simmons, we didn't have him. The recipe was there, but we couldn't adapt. We couldn't change for whatever reason. We took Snoop, made him a pocket passer for like 95% of his snaps, through massive pass rush mitigation, keeping guys out of routes. And so he had less and less targets that weren't being doubled and triple covered, and is been here for 2 weeks. And then what do we do? Keep running inside with guys who can't block unless you have massive gap movement, and you can see how that is complex too. So this whole thing is too complicated. Whether it's all the motions, can't get to the line of scrimmage and call audibles, guys, moving in motion at once because the quarterback can't set up. How could he? It's only been 2 weeks. And you can't block straight on. It's all got to be flim-flam movement. And you got to throw it really fast. This makes Snoop's conveyor belt. And it was even worse last week for Skyler. And this also says how good Tua is doing. He's making this thing somewhat passable. Now, when he comes back, it's going to be looking like it did the first 2 weeks. Because there's nothing we can do if you can't break the nickel. I've talked for years about the trend cycle, pass balance, how defenses have become very, very pass talented. The acumen of the pass defenses and the talent pools have flowed to them. They know how to stop the pass. And so you have to have the balanced running attack to break that nickel, to draw them up in leverage, get them to blitz. No one's going to blitz us for the rest of the season. We're going to see, low percentage blitzes and high deep coverage. And because nothing's going to change, and Wynn ain't going to change it. You can see Paul, he's got a ways to go. You see some nice things, but he's not going to change it this year. Tehran's broken down, and the rest. And so this conveyor belt's moving extremely fast, and McDaniel and whoever's the quarterback and the rest of the offense and defense is going to be shoving those candies in their mouth until they say, this is too much, and it's going to break. And that's what's going to happen. And that's been my eval for 3.5 years. And I think it's very accurate. I don't want to be the negative Nelly, but it's truth. I don't lie to people. This has never been, for the last 3.5 years, a business-friendly model. But I did it because I've got personal integrity, and I hated being lied to when I wasn't covering the Dolphins, and I wanted to give the truth. And I was like the voice shouting out in the wilderness for the most part. Now there's a lot of voices sounding a lot like Curtis, isn't it? Anyway, guys, appreciate all you do. You're the best. I can't always be right. I'm not going to be, but I can promise to be honest because you guys matter, right? Dolphin fans matter. So let's be clear on this going forward. This is a big moment in time. If we get divided by the media thing, Grier and McDaniel could be back, and it won't go well. They've had unprecedented picks, and it did not play out well. Don't care what draft status is and how many picks. It will be a screw-up job. We are way past our peak talent season. This whole thing is built incongruent, and it will collapse no matter what. You got to rip it down, trade off assets, get a GM that's a football guy, have him be in total control, keep who he wants, get rid of who he wants, whether it's a scouting staff, any department he sees, hire the coach that he wants, put together the scheme and philosophy he wants, and start filling the talent pool based on that philosophy and scheme, and keep that scheme going forward and not bouncing back and forth year after year. And keep who he sees that is valuable and let go who he sees is not. Until that happens, it's going to be a flim-flam, hopium, suit hustle, media push to get you in the seats and to get you showing up again without any real hope. Anyway, Curtis saying, be well, go Fins. Curtis out. Start building your own online sports book today by getting signed up with aceperhead.com service that'll allow you to book action on sports from all around the world.